Citizenship Agency, PICA. First speaker.
Honorable adjudicators, distinguished colleagues from the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, guests, and my erudite colleagues, good morning. My teammates and I rise in support of the moot. Be it resolved that the government should not own or operate for-profit enterprises. To begin our discussion, we will establish operational definitions for key terms and lay the context that should guide us towards a fruitful discussion. We are charged to focus on the Jamaican government and not just engage in a theoretical discussion that misses the contours of the Jamaican context, with all challenges and opportunities, assets and liabilities, workforce and education, health and mortality rates. Therefore, it would be imprudent for either team to attempt to focus today's discussion on Singapore, Norway, or any country's government for that matter. But before I go further, it would be remiss of me not to define the terms government and for-profit enterprises as the key terms in this moot. Government, and I quote, is a political system by which a country is administered and regulated, whilst a for-profit enterprise is an organization with its primary goal to earn income and access for its founders, leaders, and employees. As first speaker, I will lay the foundation and set the framework for this debate by focusing on the role of government. The most fundamental roles of government are to provide for the basic needs of its citizens. This includes ensuring access to clean water, food, shelter, healthcare, and education. Currently in Jamaica, our healthcare system is challenged with long waiting times, lack of proper appointment system, limited medical equipment, we have heard the horror stories, and expensive medical treatment, just to name a few, so much so that the upper echelon tend to travel abroad for surgery. The World Health Organization, WHO, reports that Jamaica ranks 53rd globally when it comes to the effectiveness of its healthcare system. Not to mention education. According to Jamaica Education Transformation Commission, the 2019 Primary Exit Profile, PEP, exam revealed that 33% of our students cannot read, 56% of our students cannot write, and 58% of our students cannot research a topic. Can you imagine after COVID-19? UNESCO states that more than 160,000 males and close to 74,000 females who are over the age of 15 lack basic reading and writing skills, making Jamaica's adult literacy rate to be 88.1% compared to that of Trinidad and Tobago, 98.7%, and Barbados, 99.6%. This indicates deep inefficiencies and inadequacies in our education system, for which successive governments have failed to address. Those are hardly sterling examples of a government managing its own business. My worthy friends, you sit comfortably, preparing to postulate that government should own or operate for-profit enterprises. Honorable judges, when the government operates for-profit enterprises, it can create a conflict of interest between the needs to generate revenue and the need to provide quality services to the public. This conflict can result in decisions that prioritize profit over the public interest, leading to a lower quality services or higher prices for consumers. In many countries, the government provides social welfare programs that help to alleviate poverty and provide a safety net for those who are unable to provide for themselves. These programs include unemployment benefits, disability payments, and food stamps. In addition to protecting the rights and freedoms of citizens, one of the most important roles of government is to promote economic growth and development. This involves creating a favorable business environment that encourages entrepreneurship, innovation, and investment. The government can do this by providing tax incentives, funding research and development, and creating policies that promote trade and commerce. Colleagues, this concretizes the moot that the government should not own or operate for-profit enterprises. Our team proposes a fiscally responsible government that cares about creating conditions for businesses and citizens to prosper. We believe our government must be fully knowledgeable about the consequences of profits and losses, as well as the factors that produce profits and losses, so our micro and large business will flourish under well-informed government policies that create economic and financial success for local and foreign investors. After all, when businesses do well, it improves our gross domestic product, GDP, lowers unemployment, and improves our quality of life indices. We are not going to suggest that government should be mindless cogs as it relates to businesses, but we are very mindful of the plethora of examples of the Jamaican government's failure to keep businesses afloat. We hardly have any ringing endorsements that would give anyone confidence in the government managing more than it can handle. Whether we are talking about the Railway Corporation of Jamaica, Air Jamaica, or the Norman Manley International Airport, which was divested in 2003 by GAP. There are far too many examples of the government's inability to take on the additional burden of owning or operating private enterprises. With that, we state categorically that the government should not own or operate for-profit enterprises. I rest my case.
Thank you, first speaker, for opening the debate for us. We invite a response from the first opposition speaker from the Ministry of Finance and Public Service. You have 8 minutes.
Honorable judges, esteemed colleagues, supporters, and friends, a pleasant good morning to you all. I'd first and foremost like to respond to some points that were raised by my esteemed colleagues from PICA. We'd firstly like to note that Air Jamaica actually failed after it was divested to the private sector, so it is not factual to say it failed as though the government is the one that actually had control when it went under. Secondly, we would like to note that economic growth and development that we have been pursuing is actually achievable through these for-profit government enterprises because the profits made from them can be reinvested into the country to spur development and so on. When it is in the hands of the private sector, they determine what it is used for and they will only be using it for their benefit rather than to further the country's agenda. Nonetheless, these points we'll get into. So, "Broke out of brokeness" is a famous lottery tagline. Wouldn't it be simply amazing if Jamaica and Jamaicans could broke out of brokenness? We are here to show you how. I stand before you today to oppose the moot. Be it resolved that the government should not own or operate for-profit enterprises. To establish our stance, we define government as adopted by the Cornell Law School as a body or entity invested with the power to manage a political unit, organization, or state. Should, per the Cambridge Dictionary, denotes that something is necessary, desirable, or important to perform. In the case of the opposition, should will be used to mean desirable. The said dictionary also defines own as belonging to or done by a particular person or thing. The Corporate Finance Institute defines operations related to businesses as activities engaged in on a daily basis to increase the value of the enterprise and earn a profit. The publicly available policy for the categorization and rationalization of public bodies 2016 importantly defines a government for-profit enterprise or commercial state-owned enterprise, you may even hear me say commercial SOE, as a corporate body that produces and supplies goods and services to the market at prices that are economically significant. That is, it can cover more than 50% of the cost of producing the outputs and has the potential to be a source of profit or other financial benefit to its owner. I'd just like to note right here, ladies and gentlemen, that this definition came from a Government of Jamaica policy, and like the PICA noted, we're not talking about any foreign country or anywhere. This is a Jamaica policy, and this is what the Government of Jamaica means when we say for profit. So this definition is also applicable to executive agencies set up in a similar manner. That being said, we have restated the moot to be resolved that commercial SOEs should not exist. We oppose that. Instead, we believe that commercial SOEs are desirable. Profitability is a worthy goal. Honorable judges and guests, Team Opposition will demonstrate this to you in this speech by outlining that owning and operating for-profit enterprises reduce the taxation burden on citizens. The second speaker will discuss the benefits of operating commercial SOEs, such as increased efficiency and reduction in fiscal risk. Finally, the third speaker will outline the strategic importance of maintaining these commercial SOEs. Note must be taken of the fact, ladies and gentlemen, that these for-profit SOEs are not out to make a killing at the expense of you and I. They merely aim, per the definition, to cover a portion of their operating costs and has the potential to make a profit. At this juncture, it is imperative for us to establish that the opposition is by no means saying that all entities should operate for a profit. Not all entities are or even have the ability to operate in such a way. For example, our police force. We recognize and accept that governments have a social responsibility to its people to provide certain services. Hence, it is desired by the opposition that only those entities that can operate in such a manner should. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the optimal outcome and the balance that is required for Jamaica and Jamaicans to break out of brokenness and move towards the prosperity for which we've been aiming. Honorable judges, the proposition will be keen, as they've started, to outline a multiplicity of failed attempts by the government to operate such entities in the past. However, we would like to emphasize that this is an ideal that is desired. And we'd also like to remind the proposition that even businesses with the sole focus of making a profit to fund 100% of their operations fail. This does not preclude them from being successful in the future. Amazon failed, then became the world's largest online retailer. Michael Jordan failed, Thomas Edison failed, or very own Usain Bolt had failed initially. What if they had quit after failure? On the point of easing the taxation burden, profits attained from SOEs can offer the government a vital source of revenue, which would in turn reduce the funding required from taxation of citizens. Look no further, ladies and gentlemen, than the Passport, Immigration and Citizenship Agency. PICA has transformed itself into a world-class institution, a feat which was achieved as a result of the profits they earned. The profits generated annually were accumulated and then reinvested into their operations, allowing them to complete projects such as implementing the new digital passport without the need for funding from the consolidated fund and without the need to increase the passport fees. Instead of all of us, ladies and gentlemen, having to bear a new tax or increased tax in the form of GCT, PAYE, and the like, or a heavier cross to bear whenever we go to the pumps, only those who need a passport or a passport-related service would fund the cause. Can you imagine how much more expenditure the government would have to cover if it had to completely fund PICA from its 2007 inception? All while aiming to make passport cheaper and then having to levy taxes whenever they needed to comply with new global standards. The cost to the government would have been staggering. It is possible, ladies and gentlemen, for a commercial SOE to operate efficiently, provide improved services, innovate, all while keeping its operating costs low and operate at a profit. Notably, colleagues, PICA is not the only SOE to achieve the dream. Honorable judges, my colleague Diego will take up the mantle to educate us further on the benefits of commercial state-owned enterprises. Commercial SOEs are desirable, profit is a worthy goal, and we owe it. We owe it to our children and their children's children to keep pursuing it. I thank you.
Thank you, First Opposition Speaker. We continue the debate with the presentation from the second Proposition Speaker. 7 minutes on the clock for PICA's second speaker.
I have heard my learned friends referring to brocking out of brockness, but have we really? Have we really broke out of brockness? My fellow opponents, I stand firmly with my first speaker in defending the moot, be it resolved that government should not operate for-profit enterprises. My learned friends, I have but one question for you. Where has the Jamaican government in the last 60+ years demonstrated its ability to adequately take care of its own business? My opponents, government cannot always be the most efficient or effective operator of profitable enterprises, simply because it has a different rationale for existence than that of its private sector counterparts. Government-owned and run enterprises are notoriously known for bureaucratic constraints, lack of investment incentives, pricing controls, centralized decision-making, and restrictions on hiring and firing workers. These decisions are usually slow and unresponsive to the needs of the company. Additionally, it may be slow to adapt to new technologies or changing consumer preferences. And this can result in the government-owned enterprise becoming outdated and less competitive, ultimately harming the public interest. A glaring example is the provision of national security for a country. The private sector would never be motivated to provide that kind of fulsome security offered by the JCF and the JDF. And likewise, the average Jamaican would not be able to afford the costs associated with a private sector company that provided that service. My fellow opponents, I am sure you will join me in agreeing with John T. Harvey in his article, Why Government Should Not Be Run Like a Business, published October 5, 2022, that not everything that is profitable is of social value, and not everything of social value is profitable. Secondly, government-owned enterprises can create a burden on taxpayers. When these enterprises are not profitable, the government must provide subsidies or bailouts to keep them afloat. These subsidies come from taxpayers' money, which could be better spent on other public services, such as education, healthcare, or infrastructure. Additionally, if the government-owned enterprise is profitable, it may be tempting for the government to rely too heavily on that revenue source and neglect other important areas of public service. I must pause to mention our most beloved airline, Air Jamaica, who racked up millions even before it was divested, and was the reason the government decided to divest. And we know what happened when it attempted to step out of its lane to own and operate that one. The Jamaica Gleaner article, Air Jamaica to Lose More Routes, published on August 13, 2008, stated, and I quote, Air Jamaica has racked up accumulated losses of $86 billion and now has an overall debt of about US $500 million or 40 billion Jamaican dollars. We all know that the government had to drop that like it was hot. Finally, I want to thank the Ministry of Finance and the public sector, my worthy opponents, own ministry, for wholeheartedly supporting our moots. One policy that the government has held through progressive administrations is the divestment of its assets that could be doing better but are not. The JIS website dated December 22, 2009, in an article entitled Government to Divest Companies, has listed several industries and companies that the government had intended to divest full or part ownership of, and as a matter of fact, to date has successfully divested. Clarendon Aluminium Productions, Jamalco, Port of Kingston, the Norman Manley International Airport, National Road and Operating Construction Company, NROC, Central Wastewater Treatment Plant, the Montego Bay Convention Center, the Sugar Company of Jamaica, Sabina Park, the Trelawney Stadium, and the shares in the Jamaica Public Service Company. All of these entities are businesses that the government had to drop like it was hot. Another article on the JIS website dated May 9, 2021, written by Alicia Smith, titled 66 Government-Owned Properties Approved for Divestment, drives our point to second base that where it says a total of 66 government-owned properties valued at $349.8 million have been approved for divestment as at the end of March 2021. This was disclosed by Minister without Portfolio in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, the Honorable Everald Warmington. My fellow opponents, I am sure you now completely agree with me that we should no more want to run the government like a business than a business to be run like government. My worthy opponents, I hope you raise your white flag as I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you, second proposition speaker. Let's invite the Minister of Finance to wave a flag. Let's see what flag they will raise. Thank you. Let's take the second speaker from Minister of Finance and Public Service. 7 minutes on the clock.
Honorable judges, my opponents, members of the audience, be it resolved, the government of Jamaica should own and operate for-profit enterprises. My first speaker detailed the foundation on which our position stands. I will bring further clarity to the ever more pressing need for the government to not only own, but might I add, increase its ownership in for-profit enterprises. This clarity will appear to utilize in the following two principles. 1, increase efficiency, and 2, reducing fiscal risk. But before I do, let me first alleviate your fears of profit and remind you that profit is commonly known as what is left after deducting your expenses from your revenue. Profits are either reinvested into the business or distributed to the shareholders. Let me ask you, who are the shareholders of state-owned enterprises? The citizens of this country are the shareholders, and the profits are for us. The Asian Development Bank, through a publication titled Efficient Management of State-Owned Enterprises, Challenge and Opportunities, dated December 2017, provided guidance on the benefits of governments owning, operating, and profiting from SOEs. SOEs are common with natural monopolies, as they allow capturing economies of scale while they can simultaneously achieve the public objective. For that reason, SOEs primarily operate in the domain of infrastructure, transportation, strategic goods and services, natural resources, development banking, and healthcare. Governments often set up SOEs, self-financing SOEs, as they operate with less bureaucracy, not as what the proposition wants us to believe, because they are able to respond at a faster pace to risk and achieve economies of scale earlier. SOE's efficiency in countries like ours is rooted in the appointment of competent and autonomous management bodies to oversee their day-to-day operations. The government has already started working, making this a reality. Might I remind you that the government has passed the Public Bodies Management and Accountability Act, Nomination, Selection, and Appointment of Board Members Regulations 2021 to support the transparent and equitable process of regulating, appointing board members of SOEs. This will allow SOEs to attract the best and most qualified talents to guide these companies to improve efficiency and profitability. Cast your minds on the efficient and transparent manner in which the Development Bank of Jamaica is able to provide financing to new ventures, to farmers, to artisans, to tourism entrepreneurs. There are numerous stories of Jamaicans being turned away from the commercial banks with solid business proposals, solely based on the premise of no collateral to stand as security. There's no land to stand as collateral, might I say. It is the DBJ, a for-profit SOE, that often provides the guidance, the financing, and the technical support to establish thousands of new businesses across this country. Honorable judges, ladies and gentlemen, this is a solid example of an efficient SOE. Reducing fiscal risk. Fiscal risk refers to the uncertainty associated with outlook in public finances and can be defined as the probability of significant differences between actual and expected fiscal performance. Over the short to medium term, COPIT's 2014 reference. The International Monetary Fund encourages the comprehensive analysis, disclosure, and management of fiscal risk. Factors that can cause fiscal outcomes to differ from expectation is needed to ensure sound fiscal public finances and macroeconomic stability, as well as fiscal transparency. The past 2 decades have shown us that fiscal risk realization can be costly. It can occur frequently and can arise from a variety of sources. The government's 2023-24 fiscal policy paper tabled in the Houses of Parliament in February 2023 stated, and I quote, "The group of self-financing public bodies continues to show resilience within an environment of economic uncertainty caused by, among other issues, rising gas prices and the residual effects of the COVID-19 pandemic," end quote. This highlights the national importance and contribution these for-profit SOEs provide to our nation. If any doubt was in your mind, the same fiscal policy paper outlined that this group of SOEs will undertake $75.9 billion in capital expenditure, which is marginally more than the $75.3 billion that will be undertaken by the central government. These planned capital expenditure projects are to provide improved housing infrastructure, improved water resources, improved health care and access to benefits of medication, improved technical and vocational training. For further clarity, the group of SOEs will earn revenues totaling $581.3 billion, while the central government will earn tax revenues totaling $897.6 billion. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a clear statement of SOEs doing more with less resources. This is how government-owned for-profit companies contribute to reducing our fiscal risk. Honorable judges, my opponents, colleagues, the Jamaican society needs and would be better off if we had more, not less for-profit commercial SOEs. Commercial SOEs are desirable. I thank you.
Thank you, second opposition speaker. We're going to invite the final substantive speaker on the proposition. That will be the third proposition speaker. 5 minutes on the clock.
I find it quite alarming that my colleagues at the Ministry of Finance and Public Service would even decide to challenge us. Today, they have not shown us where this government has efficiently addressed all of its responsibilities and have therefore proven to us that they're able to take on additional responsibilities, so much more to take care of its citizens whilst making profit. My team members have cited many examples of government failures. So before you continue to orate prepared speeches, my friends, please respond intentionally and specifically how our government has demonstrated consistently that it is able, has the capacity and the ability to make profit in private enterprises, all while taking care of its citizens. Honorable judges, specially invited guests, colleagues, and my learned friends from the Ministry of Finance and Public Service, good morning. We have successfully put forward our case in proposing the moot that the government should not own or operate for-profit enterprises. We have refuted the claims of our fellow civil servants. Let me remind you of 3 focal pointers. 1, if government should own or operate for-profit enterprises, there will be a conflict of interest in policy making, and the government would have the power to skew policy in their favor. This can lead to a less competitive business environment and ultimately lead to autocracy. In addition to that, Russia with all its oligarchs is not a shining beacon for Jamaica to follow. Secondly, small businesses will not be able to compete against a large and powerful and imposing government structure. Thirdly, some businesses may fear reprisal by the government if they outbid them or otherwise compete Russia. So we have to be careful here what we hoped for. My team members and I are pro-business. We fully advocate for a laissez-faire system that supports profit and a healthy competition among investors. We know that when businesses succeed, that it benefits everyone. And it is for this reason that we're asking government that instead of focusing on making profit, that is what business do literally, that the government must instead focus on its citizenry by supporting their holistic well-being, whether financially, academically, health-wise, in employment, security, or the general quality of life. We should never endorse any suggestion that will cause government to prioritize profit instead of its people. We would even go as far as to encourage government to develop more partnerships with businesses. These partnerships could include successful businesses having a seat at the table, whether through task force, commission, or advisors to government. Justice must not only be done, but seen to be done. The possibility of corruption and conflict of interest will be too great, and it would weigh the good the government can do in engaging the private sector. This is not just theoretically, but we have examples of this. The point of corruption is far leading in this proposed initiative. When it comes on to good governance and leadership, we don't just frivolously give additional responsibilities to all and sundry. Our government, through successful administrations, has demonstrated that it is unable to effectively own and operate for-profit enterprises. It is true that a few countries have successfully done this, whether we're talking about Denmark, Norway, Singapore, among others. But what these countries all have in common is that they were able to effectively do this because of their unparalleled healthcare system, highly qualified workforce, superior education infrastructure, and a viable transportation network, very low crime rates, high Moody's economic ranking, competitive global innovation, consistently strong economic growth, and an almost non-existent brain drain challenge, low corruption index, and a very high quality of life measure. Despite her beauty and the resilience of our people, Jamaica lacks all of these factors. So being fiscally responsible and following modern good leadership, let us pause the haste to give additional responsibilities to our government, especially since divestments have become so common here. Following the precedents of the aforementioned countries, until our government, my fellow opponents, until our government can demonstrate that they can effectively achieve their most basic goal and objective to the Jamaican people, I urge the colleagues from the Ministry of Finance and Public Service to table this ambitious agenda for the future. Therefore, our government is not present in a position to own or operate for profit enterprises. I rest my case.
Judges, opponents, members of the audience, salutations. Listening to the arguments of the proposition, I don't believe they understand the moot. I cannot identify the theme of their argument. The proposition mentioned that for-profit means that it is for the owners. If it is a government for-profit entity, then the profit is for the government and the people of Jamaica. Isn't that a desirable thing? The proposition mentioned that they are intimating that security, healthcare, and education should be privatized. Am I hearing clearly? I don't believe the proposition understands what the role of and purpose of government is. My illustrious teammates outlined the benefits of ownership of for-profit enterprises, which include reducing taxpayer burden, increased efficiency, and reduced fiscal risk. And one might say, if they are performing so well, why not divest them, as our proposition mentioned? Well, I am here to tell you, opponents, honorable judges, that there are some for-profit enterprises that the government must own. And in every self-respecting country worldwide, Jamaica included, there are enterprises that are of such vital and strategic importance to the country and society as a whole that they could never rest in the hands of any private company or any foreign government for that matter. Whether the enterprise deals with matters of national security, vital natural resources, heritage preservation, or enterprises of strategic importance to the interests of the country, ownership of these enterprises are a matter of national sovereignty. Brian Białowski's article entitled Corporations Grabbing Land and Water Overseas in the American Scientific Journal, dated February 2013, identified that global population growth and climate change have been stressing food and water supplies as a result of corporations and investors in wealthy countries buying up foreign arable land with freshwater resources. Now, ladies and gentlemen, can you imagine the NWC with all its freshwater resources, its wells, dams, reservoirs, etc., were divested and placed in the hands of private corporations? Capitalist firms are not Boy Scouts, and they are unlikely to place moral codes on good governance and above the interests and demands of their owners and shareholders. This is according to the International Institute of Social Studies, 2014. In other words, it's all about cash, all about profit, and the needs of citizens be damned. I shudder to think of a Jamaica with a divested NWC, and water is being expatriated to China. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is a thing. As reported by Anna Swanson in a Washington Post article dated May 2015 entitled, "An Incredible Image Shows How Powerful Countries Are Buying Up Much of the World's Land." Honorable judges, the NWC is just one example, but there are many other government-owned for-profit enterprises, including the Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority, the Urban Development Corporation, Petrojam, NHT, to name a few, all of which are profit-generating entities that not only provide stellar service to the country and the people of Jamaica, but their surpluses are used to fund the operations of the government. They provide budgetary support. The Minister of Finance, Dr. the Honorable Nigel Clark, has heard publicly on the Beyond the Headlines radio program, state that the surpluses generated by Petrojam were used to fund the CARE social welfare programs which benefit the most vulnerable and needy of a society. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, the government paid my grand-aunt's light bill for 6 months. Yes. Imagine if the government owned more for-profit enterprises. Less of our pension will be used to pay light bills. Honorable judges, members of the audience, it is abundantly clear, as Team MOF aptly demonstrated, it is better for everyone that the government of Jamaica should own or operate for-profit enterprises. I rest my case.
Thank you, third opposition speaker. We will pause for 1 minute before we take the reply speakers, and we will take the opposition reply speaker first, followed by the final speaker in the debate, the proposition reply speaker. So 1 minute begins now. All right, so 1 minute has elapsed. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear the final case from the opposition team. The opposition reply speaker, 3 minutes on the clock. Please note that no points of information can be asked of the speaker.
Honorable judges, opponents, members of the audience, good morning again. The proposition would want us to believe that government is more corrupt than the private sector. Have you seen the news of lately? Have you seen what is happening out there? People are corrupt, not civil servants alone. Jamaicans, people are inherently corrupt. Do not turn on your fellow civil servants as if we are worse than the private sector. Have you heard about SSL? Billions missing. The proposition would want us to believe that the private sector is better at operating businesses than us. We have divested numerous past state-owned enterprises that were not operating efficiently. Cast your minds on the bauxite industry. The government once controlled the bauxite industry. It was our Honorable Minister of Finance in the Houses of Parliament that made it clear that the bauxite industry did not pay 1 red cent into the Capital Development Fund during the 2020-2021 financial year. Those bauxite companies, they operated here, they dug our soil, they left craters in the ground, they dislocated our people, and they paid not $1 in taxes to the people of this country. If the government had control of the bauxite sector, the benefits that they attained from the bauxite would be for the people of this country, not the private sector. The proposition wants us to believe that foreign interests would manage resources better than us. But Jamaica's policy is that profits earned in this country, 100% of it can be repatriated overseas. What is in that for us? The crumbs falling from the table of the private sector? I don't think we would need that. The proposition would reminded us that the government divested the Jamaica Public Service. And I'm here to ask you all this morning, are you satisfied with your light bill? The Jamaica Public Service earned over $7 billion in profits during the year 2022 on the backs of hardworking Jamaicans. If the government had retained the Jamaica Public Service, improved its efficiency, we would be all better off, much better off today. I will remind you that the government has the capacity, the people of Jamaica, civil servants, have the capacity to work in the interest of all of us, the shareholders of state-owned enterprises, and these are desirable for the benefit of all Jamaicans, whether here or overseas. I thank you.
Thank you, Opposition Reply Speaker. And that closes the case for the opposition team. We'll take the final speaker in the debate, the Proposition Reply Speaker.
Shakira, you spoke of the potential of government to operate for-profit enterprises, but you failed to provide example of how. I beg to ask the question, does Amazon run a country? Does Usain Bolt run a country? You speak of PICA's ability to earn profit, but until now, you have not highlighted how that profit contributed to providing the basic needs of its citizens, how those funds have found its way in supporting healthcare and education. My friend Thomas, government organizations must run in a business-like manner, not as a business. You spoke to the outcome impact that is to come, but not yet realized. Garvey, let's clear up the misconception. I do not think our fellow civil servants were listening, as we never stated that healthcare education should be wholly privatized, as these are basic fundamental rights for the government to provide. We propose proper legislation and policies to guide the effective running of private-owned enterprises. Even if governments around the world find themselves in position of owning or operating for-profit enterprises ranging from public utilities to airlines as a means of generating revenue, our government is simply not ready to take that one on at this time. It has been proven that our government is not the most efficient or effective operator of for-profit enterprises. Private companies which are motivated by the desire to maximize profits are often better equipped to innovate and respond to the changes in the marketplace. Government-owned enterprises can create a burden on taxpayers. In closing, the government should not own or operate for-profit enterprises. These enterprises create conflicts of interest, be less efficient and effective than private companies, burdens to taxpayers, and be prone to corruption and political interference. Instead, the government should focus on its core role of serving the public interest and leave the task of generating profits to the private sector. By doing so, the government can ensure that it is using public resources effectively and efficiently while also providing high-quality service for its public. Colleagues, let us all agree that the government should stick to the business at hand and focus its main obligation of running a Jamaica for the purpose of providing value for the citizens while making Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business.
Thank you, Proposition Reply Speaker. And thank you to all the debaters. The judges will step out and I hand over to Aniki.
Thank you so much. Let's clap them, ladies and gentlemen. The arguments have been made by Team PICA, who proposed the moot, be it resolved that government should not own or operate for-profit enterprises, and was opposed by Team Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. I believe the arguments are solid on both sides. Wouldn't you agree? No? I know that was inevitable, right? You have correct. But the judges have stepped out to deliberate, and the next voice you hear will be that of the chief adjudicator, who will sum up the match and announce the winners. But well done, teams. May the best team win.
Thank you, everyone. Good morning. Are we still in the morning or are we in the afternoon? Oh, we're still in the morning. Good morning, everyone. Do we have all the team? Right, all the team members are here. That was an interesting debate, and the decision that has been made with respect to the team that has emerged, the winner of this match, was a unanimous decision. All three adjudicators would have decided that that team would have presented the more persuasive and convincing arguments that would have won this debate. I will talk about what we saw in the debate. We'll look at some of the arguments, and I will walk you through the analyses that we used to inform the decision so that you can understand clearly what would have informed our decision as to the team that wins this debate. Then I will announce the team that wins the debate, and then I will also announce the best debater in today's match. What did we get out of the proposition team? Proposition came, and proposition highlighted to us that government has a fundamental role, and that role is to protect the interests and the well-being of its citizens. Government proposition went on to outline that that role comes in direct conflict when government seeks to own for-profit enterprise. Then they went and they described to us a bit of the status quo, what's happening in the country with respect to the high cost of healthcare, the literacy rate, and the sort of economic environment in which we exist. We thought that that context was important and adequate to set the context of the debate. So in that regard, we would have credited the first proposition speaker for sufficiently describing to us what I would have outlined in the training, the status quo problem. And we thought that that was beautifully done by the first proposition speaker. We heard first the substantive argument from first prop that there is a conflict of interest that emerges when government seeks to own for-profit enterprises. To the discredit of first proposition speaker, we didn't hear a lot of that development. We would have wanted to know why should we care that there will be a conflict of interest and why this conflict of interest is important and ought to be taken into account. But whilst first prop didn't tell us about this conflict of interest substantially, we got it from her teammate down in third prop, who went beautifully in articulating to us the importance of taking into account this conflict of interest. She would have highlighted to us that when government engages in for-profit enterprises, government essentially engages in a competitive environment where they are competing with private sector enterprises, and this harm in other aspects public sector, private sector relationships that are important for government to respond to the needs of its citizens and the welfare. And we think that private sector, public sector relationship is important, and as the third speaker would have highlighted, is also very important. They would have highlighted as well that when government seeks to earn profit from their profit-making entities, it directly clashes with the government's ability to take care of its citizens and to look after the well-being and the welfare of its nation. And we thought that that case was sufficiently articulated by the third speaker, who essentially articulated as well that government is the one that regulates the economy and sets the regulation for the private sector to engage and to compete. But then, not only will government be a regulator in the economy, government will be a competitor in that very same economy, which means that government policies could be skewed to unfavorably give that government the competitive advantage in the industry at the expense of other private sector entities that engage in that sector. And we think that that is a very compelling argument, because that is in reality one of the real risks that is amplified in society when governments seek to take on for-profit enterprises. So on that argument, it was sufficiently presented by proposition. We did not hear a lot of contestation to that argument from the opposition team. So at the end of the debate, we had to credit that argument. So moving from first prop, let's over to first up. what did we get from opposition? Opposition would have highlighted to us that, well, government needs to generate profits so that governments can protect the very same welfare that proposition articulates that they want government to focus on. So we thought that that was an interesting way for proposition to articulate the need for government to generate sufficient revenue through for-profit enterprise. So we would have credited that line of thought from opposition. But what else did opposition tell us? Opposition told us that when government owns and operates private sector enterprises, the revenues that are generated from these enterprises, and they would have regarded them as commercial state-owned enterprises, opposition told us that it reduces the tax burden, and we heard that beautifully from First Up, that it reduces the tax burden on the citizens because now taxes will be less needed to fill that funding pool that is now created. But in the estimation of the adjudicators, that argument was not sufficient enough to respond to the case from proposition. When proposition highlighted that there is precedence, that we have a history of government failing to operate profitably for-profit enterprises. You would have heard as well the plethora of entities that proposition outlined to you that failed under government's management then when they were regarded or when they were created for the purpose of for-profit making. So we thought the fact that there is a history and that there are precedents that we can point to as to the likelihood of the failure of these for-profit enterprises, then it is convincing an argument to bring to discourage government seeking to own and operate for-profit enterprises. So we credited opposition for that, proposition rather. Then proposition went further to take this debate by looking at what are the unique challenges that governments face why they should not own and operate for-profit enterprises. Proposition told us that one, government is inherently inefficient. They told us that government is highly bureaucratic, and then these characteristics of government harm the very competitive nature that government will have to take on if government is to become profitable against private sector entities. And we thought that that was an excellent idea to bring. They also supported that argument by telling us that, well, government historically has been slow to respond. And because government has been slow to respond and is not agile enough, then this is inimical to government being competitive against private sector enterprises, which might see government providing perhaps lower quality products or higher prices. And in our estimation, those arguments were convincing relative to what we heard from opposition. And again, no contestation. We did not hear any sort of response to that argument. What did we hear though? We heard an attempt to respond to the argument. And the attempt to respond to the argument was that governments can set up boards, public sector boards that are efficient and can run these private sector enterprises for profit profitably. And then they would have highlighted that the government currently has a thrust where the government is seeking to revamp public sector boards, etc. So what is very important to highlight is that down in the third proposition speech, the third prop responded to that argument a bit indirectly by talking about the kind of characteristics that exist in other countries that make them more likely to generate profit from for-profit enterprises that are absent in our economic environment, such as the high level of education, positive healthcare sector, etc. That even if we were to have an excellent, proactive public sector board, based on what you have proffered, it would still not be sufficient enough for governments to run these profit-making enterprises profitably. We discredited proposition for but it's not a significant discredit in the debate when proposition would have highlighted that private sector, that some services offered by government cannot be divested, such as national security. We thought it was not good to say that because opposition already highlighted that we're not talking about national security, opposition already conceded that there are some services offered by government that cannot be diversified, such as national security. So just to highlight that the argument of national security was not credited in the debate, given what was posited, convincingly so, by the opposition team. And then there are a host of other arguments that would have propelled, in our estimation, the winner to win this debate. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it might be clear by now that I am highlighting to you that the team that has won this debate, ladies and gentlemen, would be the team from Passport, Immigration, and Citizenship Agency, PICA. PICA would have emerged with 247 points relative to the excellent attempt and the excellent effort put forward by the opposition team, ending on 227 points. The final announcement I will make before I take my seat is that the best debater in this match would have been the third proposition speaker. And just to give a bit of background to why she's the best speaker, she spoke eloquently, but that was not the reason for her being the best speaker. We thought that the arguments that won this debate profoundly came from her. We thought that she would have developed the arguments profoundly, and it is because of the arguments that she brought to this debate why she is the best speaker. All right, I am available, and any clarifications needed, please come. Any questions asked, I am open to answering all the questions. Congratulations, PICA, an excellent attempt by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.